Welcome back, everyone. We have one final game for the first day of Week 8. We are nearly done with the entire split as well. Week 8, can't believe we're already here, and we're already getting a really good fight for that final playoff spot, because we were just talking about before. We were looking at teams and how they're going to do. TSM, this was their chance to take a spot away from Immortals, past them in the standings, but they stumbled.
Especially for striking distance purposes, because like C9 ended up at 1-1 today, so they didn't do too heavily, or at least do super well for advancing themselves within the standings. And then Immortals obviously fell 0-2 just a little bit ago on the stream itself, so like you were able to see that Immortals didn't climb any. So that's the team sitting directly in front of TSM. So it's kind of tough to like come out and like TSM is going to have to try to go 1-1 to keep themselves within relative like aspect close enough to Immortals to stay competitive, to make sure that they can stay in, because this if they also go 0-2 here, not only would it be like CLG's first 2-0, which would be really cool to watch, but also it's just like nothing is happening in the standings. All of a sudden basically it becomes Immortals and TSM fighting for the final playoff spot, and Golden Guardians also slightly encroaching with their win today, maybe getting closer just by a little bit.
Hey, you know what? There's still 6 games remaining for most of these teams. 7 for the 2 at hand here. That is a lot of ground you can make up for.
Oh, yes.
We even talked about CLG, the miracle run they have to make right now, having to win every single game and then also hoping that teams stumble themselves. A team like TSM, that they could possibly, if they get this 2-0 over them, make it so it's that much easier for them to steal away the final playoff spot.
Oh, yes. And now TSM have to come up with a game plan in this particular instance to get themselves back to a 1-1, because even just a 1-1 does get them into a better position. It puts them on even ground with Immortals in terms of game score. Then it just comes down to tiebreaker, and it's a lot easier to come back from in that regard. So for this game, obviously, like the early game didn't go immaculately. You gave over Scaly. You gave up enough gold to where it actually mattered. The team fight was superior. I think Hyper played really well that game. It would be nice if they got a bunch more support for Hyper or some champion that is even better at bullying out the early jungle matchup, because despite some of the great moonfalls, there wasn't the greatest follow-up for it. So if you get something super aggressive, like that level of performance that he just had on something like a Lee Sin would have almost certainly shut out Keel's early game, and that team fight would have been a lot harder to execute if you're on the side of CLG in the first place.
Well, TSM were always on a timer in that game. They always had to contend against the scaling options on CLG, and unfortunately, the alarm went off. They realized that they were out of time, and the game fell apart from there. So going into this next game, I'm really curious to see if there are going to be any changes like you were talking about. Sword coming in for Takeover, if they decide to go for that route to make it so they have a different play style, or if they continue to go with Takeover, they try to draft more around Takeover and Hyper playing together as a unit, as opposed to just winning out the lane outright.
Or even just like, again, there were a number of times where Takeover got out of lane, but there weren't a ton of times where you're able to pair specifically the Lucian with the Diana to aggress against the jungler, which like one time it did happen. It was because Ryze had caught out Hyper and he had to make like a decent outplay just to make sure he didn't go down in the one-on-one. I would like to see those two go back to bullying side lanes, because those two compared to what, put together were a piece that earlier on in the split TSM was really able to bank on. So I would love to see that one come out from the side of TSM if they're going to keep him in the game, whatever that might be. If Sword comes in, they can go to some different options as to things they might want to accomplish. Enchanters do open up in the mid lane. More mages open up in the mid lane. I'm not sure what else Sword has to bring, but I know his champion pool is pretty big to consider. So that's also a possibility to actually think about, is whether or not that open champion pool, potentially having more blind pick champions, might be up their wheelhouse, especially on this blue side.
It'd be interesting to see how it's going to change, going on to the different sides, seeing what bans that they're going to actually be allowed, as opposed to having to ban a wave that's in jail. They banned the Gwenna as well, then banning Zig, which left open Viego immediately to be taken by CLG, while not really having the best of answers themselves. You get the Diana. What else did they get? They got the Forest in that initial rotation. Not what I'd consider the strongest first picks to come in from a team.
Yeah, they had their priorities in a certain order. They really push heavily for some of the earlier games, some of the heavier pushing stuff to try to support. And while some of it worked, it wasn't perfect across the board. So I would like to see them return to especially Cody Sun scaling, because like Cody Sun is extremely good in the later stages carrying, or even like if you're going to go early game, go Kalista, because he popped off on Kalista against the likes of Dignitas, or not Dignitas, my apologies, FlyQuest in the previous week during those team fighting. Cody Sun's capable of carrying a game. Give him the ability to, instead of putting him on something like Lethality Varus, which is really there for a lot more control, and then for poking down really squishy champions.
And the thing I still want to see is that Yasuo-Diana combination for the side of TSM. I don't know if we'll see it this series. We'll see if that actually ends up that or the fiddlesticks for heal. Would love that as well. But it's up in the air of what we're going to see for this final game of our stream today between these two teams, because they have these fun picks that they kind of keep on the back burner, and each team has to respect them. They can't just say, oh, you know what, whatever, we have the matchup. There's no way Keel's going to play Fiddlesticks, because he's played it into some bad matchups and still won. He's still able to find these flanks, these angles to be able to win out. Same for Takeover with the Yasuo-Diana combination. That has pretty much replaced the old days of Yasuo-Gragas. It's now about Yasuo and Diana going in as a unit.
Can I just say also, I think Keel over the last 10, 15 games or something has played 90% of them on mages, if you count LeBlanc as a mage, because obviously she's an assassin, but she's a mage assassin because she's got magic damage and things like that. Yone is also a champion in the wheelhouse of somebody like Takeover, which would be dope to see also, because it's a counter pick. And on blue side, if you lock in Yone, they can't lock in a mage all of a sudden. And RJS is now off comfort, where he has to play something that has now lost a bunch of steam out of the mid lane. So it's okay, do you pick Lee Sin out of the mid lane? Is that what you pick into it? What is your response to Yone if you pick it in 4th, 5th rotation on the blue side, in that area, the 4th, 5th pick for blue side for the side of TSM, if they keep him in to be able to have that, things like that you have to consider as well, as that's a really scrappy champion. It can help support because it can move relatively quickly. Your E allows you to fish a lot more, allows Takeover to play a lot more aggressively without having to worry about being punished as much. There's so much they could do with the draft. I'd like to see them get really creative with what they're going to do here.
Granted, RJS did play that Rise blind, not knowing what was going to be on the either side, still went into it. I wouldn't be surprised if RJS did the same thing, even if they're there's the Yasuo, there's the Yone that you have to deal with, just grabbing that Rise, because RJS knows how to play that champion to AT and feels very confident going into anything.
And he was good on it, don't get me wrong. A fair amount went his way in the earlier phase of the game because there was a lot of action around mid lane that ended up costing health bars that he was able to capitalize on. Not only the Diana pick, there's also the mid dive that came through he was able to steal on. And that stuff really got RJS into the game. If that stuff doesn't happen, I think it takes another dragon or so to actually get into territory where all of a sudden TSM is in control. They get to pick when to fight around the next dragon. The Rise isn't quite as strong. Maybe that's an effect that happens on the game. So maybe RJS also getting gold into him is something considerable. But definitely the solo lanes seem to be the two targets of affection that could be left. TN obviously scaled on his own that game, even though the laning phase wasn't perfect against Haunter. Just a little bit of resource at the beginning to punish Haunter's positioning, and it was enough to keep him relevant until later when he really took over. And then, of course, the resources going onto RJS on the likes of the Rise, that clearly had fantastic ramifications. This is the gameplay style, I think, for the side of CLG, where Keel is working to get those two into a position where they can begin to carry the team.
As well, then you have the bot lane of Failures and Thresh, a hard lane to actually do anything against. Pretty much that entire composition of CLG, all they had to do was hold firm and not die too often, and they were able to do that plenty. Sure, they did suffer at 3,000 deficit immediately, but they're able to claw their way back in, because that's how those champions all work. They're able to make sure they can get these items. You get 2 items on Viego, absolutely immense. You get 2 items on Rise, immense. Same with the Failures. All of it fell right into place.
That it did. I'm excited to see what the teams are going to get into once we get into drafts, just because now CLG might have an attack plan against the side of TSM, and whether or not they can execute on it a second time is going to be really important, because, again, they're fighting for their first win of the split and for their playoff lives, potentially. Again, we're not confirming anything, but going 8 straight certainly will help you to try to make sure that you can get yourselves in place. I think after today's games, if you win 2 games against the side of TSM and against the side of Immortals having gone 0-2, those are 2 of the teams that potentially you could pass in the standings. So while, again, mathematically it might not be prepared, because we didn't prepare all 8 sets of games for each of the teams today to be able to track which ones have to win certain places, if you're going to have a chance, you're going to have to go out, and this is one of the teams you got to beat.
Yeah, we don't have a foldy sheet just yet. That's gonna maybe next week. Maybe next week we'll be able to get the foldy sheets and see how that's gonna go. But we're into draft for game number 2.
Printer's not big enough for a foldy sheet.
I don't know. You never know.
How do they make the foldy sheet? Do you have to
with paper,
put in
usually.
Do you have settings and printers, special printers that put the folds in for you, or do you fold it yourself?
Oh, you fold it yourself. You gotta fold it.
So they print just one big sheet?
Yeah.
Is it one long paper?
Yeah.
Who do you get that long a paper? What kind of special printer is that?
Or go down to somewhere like that. But we're not talking about foldy sheets. That's next week. We're into draft here. We got Ziggs, Thresh. banned away, and then there it is, the Viego banned away to not wanting to even try to see if they can force CLG Academy themselves to ban it here as the final thing.
Nope. Notice also Xin Zhao not given away. Pretty sure Hyper played it once and had 24 KDA on it, so he's never allowed to see that champion again in its entire existence. Lee Sin is available, which is a Hyper champion and can be played by like the solo lanes. Sword is also
Hyper
in.
likes to play it.
There's that as well. Yeah, Hyper does love to play it, yes. And with Sword in, again, we're expecting a bit more of the type of like prototypical blind pick type mid lane, like mages, things that are a little bit more comfortable playing into anything, which is what Sword tends to go to. I know Karma's on that list. I think Lulu's on that list. I don't know if he's played Lulu yet, but I know he's played Karma as a potential grab to help support that jungler in Hyper.
Here we go, going for the jungle as well. Getting that Diana immediately here for the side of TSM. Well, this is the thing I was looking at. This Kalista that was left wide open, that we know that Cody-san likes to play as well. Sure, you don't have to ban it, especially if you just draft it yourselves and you make it so that you're going to have a strong bot lane.
Interesting to think that they're going to put this much priority on it for Katsuri to begin the game, as it's an aggressive bot lane to try to work in. Now it's a question of
take it away from Cody-san.
I wanted to take it away as well, yeah. But now what's the response for Cody-san? Because now you do not have the Ziggs as a response. And the thing is, the champion that someone suggested to me as a counter pick to Kalista to try to bait that out, so that the strategy here was to pick Ziggs first and then flex it mid and put Kalista in bot lane potentially, or to put Ziggs in so that they pick Kalista and then pick Draven into it. But I don't think Cody-san plays the Draven, so I doubt we'll get that pick. Instead, we'll probably get something like Kai'Sa. I think Kai'Sa is the champion that I've seen mostly into Ziggs and Kalista and things, but I don't know if that's a perfect matchup either.
Well, it could be. We'll see that. I mean, he's played Aphelios, he's played Ezreal, Xayah even played a couple times. There it is, the Xayah getting locked in for Cody-san. And I wonder if they just go for the Xayah Rakan bot lane, more engaged to be able to follow up Hyper and try to actually help facilitate him a bit more in these fights.
And more roaming power for Yursan, who was already all over the map in the previous game with the likes of the Nautilus. Imagine if you have the ability to go over walls and stuff, the mobility that Rakan brings, and all the speed that you can go into fights with. It makes it so easy to impact a bunch of the lanes that come through. They go for the Renekton. Again, this was, with Takeover in, it almost certainly can be flexed between mid and top lane, but to this point now, Sword doesn't play it. At least he hasn't played it all season, and so it's definitely going to Haunter, or almost definitely going to Haunter here. And now...
Would expect that, but here we go. Rise picked it. This is what I actually kind of thought, is that RJS doesn't really care too much about picking this up blind. He did it last time, and this time it is into Sword. Sure, Sword likes more of the control mages, the Zoe especially. These are champions you could possibly play, but it's really going to be up in the air of what Sword actually thinks he's going to have the best time into Rise. And I'm actually thinking the Victor. The Victor is something that has been slowly coming back into the meta. I wonder if they just grab that for wave clear.
Irelia is gone, so that's not going to be a Sword champion. I wonder if, like, I've heard ramblings about Cassiopeia, and that used to be, like, the old school Rise counter pick, as, like, that would be fun. Especially with, like, Xayah, who... on occasion has difficulty playing into team fights only because you have to play so safe when you have like Gale Force, and you have your ultimate, you have your flash. So many people want to dive onto you. You're burning those tools. You're not getting off auto attacks. So that's a way to get like consistent damage into a fight. And especially when you have Moonfall and you throw it onto Miasma, you have also like the Petrifying Gaze, and then you throw a Renekton onto that. There's a ton of AoE damage to go through, as well as the through damage from Xayah, especially with Feather Pull on top of it. Nobody's living through that kind of a combination, so it's a lot more follow-up. But I don't think that matchup is as good for Cassiopeia. Again, over the years, that's kind of deteriorated. It's not perfect for Cassiopeia the way it used to be a very good counter into Rise. And I don't know if Sword plays it right now because he hasn't played it all split. It's at least something I've heard has had some power in the recent days.
And you know what? I'm kind of with it, to be honest, because it's a great thing to have against something like a Kalista. You put down the grounded effect. Kalista now becomes not a champion, not able to do really anything against that Cassiopeia, but we get this bot lane Tom Kench for hooks.
I would like to see a top lane Tom Kench at some point.
Could be.
It could still be there. They could still flex it. But yeah, I've seen it with Kalista a couple of times. It's got a ton of engage, and it fits well with what she's trying to do. And it allows her to position aggressively because, again, even with your ultimate being like the grab instead of your W being the grab, you still have the ability to keep her safe in one fight or reposition her one time without too much of a worry. As it is Yursan's Alistar. I think this has been the best champion for Yursan. That and Nautilus, he's played a ton of Nautilus with like mixed win rate results. But the Alistar has looked really, really good as well and has really good results on its own, comparative, like when you look at it inside of game and what he's able to accomplish. So those two are the ones I trust him with the most. And then they go to the Gallia, which again, that's not a takeover champion, that's a sword champion to support the team fighting that comes out from TSM.
And works really well. I talked about the Rakan before, just to be able to have the Xayah Rakan bot lane, but also the engage with Diana. Now you have this Galio on top of it as well, to make sure that when the Diana dives in, I know you were looking at that, I was waiting. I kind of felt like we were getting baited in on that one. But, yeah, there it is. Gangplank in for the top lane to try to be able to help out with the scaling yet again for CLG.
That it is, and it's a really good team fight, and global support is always a very underestimated aspect of a lot of what happens in this game. It's very difficult, I think, in this particular case for the likes of Hauntzer to get really aggressive into Tian, and the dive potential from the Diana also has to be considered as a possibility as well. So like you have those two that combined, like you said, it's kind of like a budget, like Nidalee Renekton, where like you can dive and you can set up aggressive plays in the earlier stages, but then Diana scales pretty well until the later stages, doesn't have that same kind of like single target burst that you would want specifically. But Tian should play relatively safe, but it is a bit slower in all accounts, because again, you have another scaling aspect too. So now I'm expecting Katsuri and Hooks to pick up a fair amount of the slack in that regard compared to the Viego, who was about a little bit more last game.
I agree with you on that one. Just making sure that they can play around the bot lane a little bit more than last time. Tian, I think, will be fine on an island. It's going to be kind of like what we saw a little bit for Tian, where he got ganked early on, but he had already gotten some help nearly immediately afterwards. Here, I feel like Tian's just going to be like, screw it, whatever. Kill me a bunch, it doesn't matter, because we're going to play around the objective game in the bot side of the map with this Kalista, with this Tahm Kench. We right now, here, Rebel Fox, we are at the precipice of possibly a first for CLG Academy. If they win this game, it is their first 2-0 of the summer split, and it starts off what could potentially be the miracle run.
I would love nothing more than to watch CLG Academy team, especially after like kind of the tough year that CLG has had, or at least the tough split that CLG has had between both their academy and also their like LCS squad. It would be nice to see them have something like that to work on, to be able to push like that. I know a good amount of the coaching staff behind the scene, a bunch of those guys work really, really hard on a lot of like what they do inside of like the actual like scouting and coaching and stuff. I've met a lot of them in person as well, and I know CLG has a lot of passion for what they like to do. So it would be nice to see something like that, even just to make a run, even if they fail, to have a couple of good successes to close their split on before they end up going into proving grounds.
Yeah, because right now they are destined for the qualifiers, and that is where things are going to get really dicey. You and I, we've been seeing a lot of academy, a lot of amateur as well. We know how much talent is out there, and we can honestly say that this qualifiers is going to be probably even more hotly contested than the last. There are so many good teams, organizations. Team Luke talked about it earlier, the fact that you have Arrow on Wildcard shows just how strong amateur is right now.
Oh, I can't wait to introduce Arrow to the Academy scene. That's going to be an absolute blast. We actually got to talk to him, to sit down, and I know he was talking about how when Sven left Academy, there was no one he was that excited to play against. Not that he was disrespecting anybody, but more so that like I asked him who it was that he was looking forward to most to playing, and Sven was the only one he named by selection. So Arrow clearly thinking ahead of time, and now CLG, maybe even TSM might have to think into that boat as well, because they might be facing him sooner than they would have normally.
Especially if they end up falling here to CLG. You can see that despite the fact, it's Gangplank. This is the thing about Gangplank that everyone always forgets about. He is far more of a lane bully than people give him credit for.
The level 1s are always fun to watch, but you always trade a bunch of health at level 1, but level 2 trading on Gangplank is disgusting. It is unreal how much you can accomplish with like barrels, resetting your passive, being able to give you that movement speed. It's so underrated at the level 2 mark. Level 3 is also pretty good because like you have at least a fair amount with like W being able to cleanse C and a fair amount more damage and stuff like that to work with. And it is a scaling champion still, because most of this is poke coming out. But again, at level 1, when you have true damage added onto your auto attacks and you have the ranged Q that applies on hit effects, it's still really good, especially when your grass comes through as teleport comes to bot lane.
TP Hooks, you're way too far out. They got the exhaust, trying to see if they can help out anything, but they have to give the first blood over. With no connect coming in from Sword, they'll just take that one for Cody-san.
I am not sure at all what happened for the setup here. I don't know who is to blame for this nonsense, but somebody is making very aggressive calls on the side of CLG, and somehow Hooks ends up behind the turret at 3 minutes into the game and ends up getting...
He didn't even flash!
No, he didn't.
He was just there!
Well, I mean, once he's back there, like, there's no way you're getting out. Like, there's 4 people around. Like,
no, I'm just saying it. Like, he didn't even flash to get back there. He's just suddenly there.
He just walked right through the turret, I guess, is apparently what happened. So that's a little shocking. I wonder if we can get a replay whatsoever, what happened in that situation, because I'm thoroughly thwarted and confused as to what happened. Thank you so much. Our production team is absolutely smart. Give them a ton of applause. Okay, so it was just Volibear cutting through. It's the W under, and then Hook's just immediately dying.
Regretting his decision.
Regretting his decision to go that deep, yes.
Wait a minute. I don't belong here.
Yes, Abyssal Voyage is... It's transparent nowadays. It's not as hidden anymore.
Also, not as long range. It's a lot easier to be able to find out. I think it was just too early from Hooks. They wanted to be able to play with Keel. He didn't wait for his Volibear to be there, so he got punished for it. And giving a kill over to Cody-san, this is something that can work out really well for TSM, because we didn't really get to talk about what their composition wants to be able to accomplish. They have insanely good team fight, and a lot of that is going to be built around Hyper and Cody-san being the damage dealers.
I really like the idea of if Alistar and Haunter, or my apologies, Alistar and Renekton can tank the majority of the engage coming through, the counter engage is disgusting out of Hyper and Yurson and Sword, who are able to take that. And especially if like you can soak a good amount of the engage and none of it applies to the Xayah, so she can keep her defensive tools to keep like heal off and kill Kapsuri and Hooks off so you can't throw somebody on top of him. There's a lot of kite back potential here for the side of TSM. So like they are a team fighting composition. Fighting forward is not impossible because you've got Diana for the delivery of Galio into backline. Renekton can do similar things. Your son can do similar things as well. Yes. Hooks, rest the Abyssal Voyage.
No, he didn't want to do it there because they've spotted out. They want RJ outside. I don't think they need him. They just want him to be there because getting more gold into this rise, like they kind of did last time. Think about it. Only 5 minutes into the 10 minutes into the game, he was already 1-0-1 on that rise, getting a lot of not priority because it was a Lucian matchup, but being able to stay relatively even into a matchup that's going to be difficult is a great showing for RJS. And now having an easier matchup, we got to keep our eyes on how he's able to perform.
We do. Hopefully, if they are able to break him loose, even if they don't give him the same kind of resources in the very beginning of the game, he's going to be perfectly fine. Because RJS, again, last game on the Rise was really, really good. This time, I don't know that I like Everfrost. I hope he doesn't build that item, only because like it's difficult to see where it is that the Everfrost is going to be useful unless you engage, and then they counter-engage, and then you're counter-engaging their counter-engage. I feel like I would rather them just work towards like pushing through whatever frontliner soaks a fair amount of the initial CC, which suggests it should be like Ludens. That's what I would be. That's what I think would be better rather than Everfrost just trying to combo people and trying to like set up like further plays from coming through. Because I feel like there's enough disruption on the side of TSM that if you sit there with an Everfrost and you try to set up combos, then it's just not going to be fast enough. That's how I see it. We'll see if RJ
Hyper wanted to steal away at that Scuttle Crab, but Monster is pretty low. He's going to be able to get the dominance, and here's the heroic entrance. They actually decide to focus on Keel, and I like that play.
Yeah, well played right there. They're able to find the aggression in the river. It's Keel who's able to step into top side and grab that Rift Herald away because he had the support of the top laner, but because RJS backed and because Galio has ultimates, they're able to generate a little bit of a play right there as the ultimate, the heroic entrance, barely catches the very end of what had happened to the Volibear, so Keel gets caught with that just a little bit and ends up going down, giving a kill over to the Galio to help kickstart this lane because Sword is down a fair amount of CS, but once the AP starts to come through, the wave clear does start to stack up and eventually Galio can at least compete with Rise to some extent.
Especially when it comes to being able to rotate around the map. What we want to see with Takeover, but I feel like it's similar here with Sword in, especially on this Galio, just wanting to be someone who could tag team with Hyper. Always going to be the first one on the call to move around the map.
I agree. It's I think favorable. This is what they were trying to run with the likes of Takeover in the previous game with the likes of the Lucian, but the Lucian got aggressed against early and they weren't able to play a bunch of river type fights because it was into a Volibear, and so they were either like kind of scared off or something had happened, but they weren't able to actually generate those kinds of plays with the likes of the Lucian, which would have been preferential, as now it's the Galio who's able to support things from much further distance, so Sword doesn't have to worry as much about having priority, because as long as his ultimate is available, he can always make the move.
Already started by TSM Academy. I don't think that Kirsan is in the wings, looking for the play. Keel, you got yourself fished out that time round, and it's going to be easy crab buffet for TSM.
I am such a big fan of Yurson. The more I watch Yurson, the more I'm convinced he's one of the best supports we have inside of Academy, just because of his ability to make effects across the map consistently. Just all the time, he's finding roams, he's finding like every single angle he possibly can inside of team fights. He is making proper decisions very consistently about what to do on the map and what to do inside of team fights. So I give a bunch of props to Yurson, who has stepped in at the beginning of the split. Again, TSM started, I think last split it was, with Fizzy, who actually had some decent performances, but they knew what they had in Yurson, and I respect that they stuck with it.
Moonfall coming in. It's a Devourer used to be able to gobble up Hyper. He is dead there, and unfortunately, they would have loved to give that kill over to RGS, but Hook, he'll be able to take his own.
And they do. Invade onto the bottom side here. They're able to push in just to make sure that Hyper gets it kind of responded to after that play. I guess Haunter is looking for something into TN just as fast as possible because he knows there's nothing there.
Probably the time to get it. The cannon barrage has already been used, so getting the flash too, that's a great play coming in from Haunter.
No TP either, so you're going to be able to hopefully push in what is, I think, a wave and then another wave coming out. So there's 2 waves, hopefully, that are going to go down to TN. Actually, TN's going to stick around for this. I wonder if Hyper's going to be able to make his way up fast enough to maybe punish this if the overstay comes through from Gangplank. Hopefully, Haunter is able to kind of slow play this wave to allow time for Hyper to come up, maybe take the Gromp on the way up, maybe get the Rift Herald on the way up, and then go for a dive on the TN.
They are playing it really slow right now, trying to see how long it will take for them to be able to get those minions there. TN, unfortunately, not having enough damage to fully burst out any of those minions, so it'll just be Haunter getting a plate, getting a lot of damage, not really needing to call up Hyper just yet, because like you said, has a lot that he can grab before going up topside.
Oh, yes. And Haunter's playing this really well because he's playing extremely aggressive as though Hyper is currently hovering him, which is why TN has to back off because there's no vision of where Hyper is at whatsoever. He's question mark pinging it, not knowing, which is why he's calling up the cover coming out from heal. But now, all of a sudden, Hyper, he shows his face, but he's not able to actually do it.
There's a 2-level difference between Haunter and TN right now. They've got the Rift Herald, they've got heal as well, so it's going to be a trade of blow for blow, but there's going to be more damage onto that turret coming in from TSM Academy. Not fully getting that final plate right there. Trying to see if they can at least crack that for a little bit extra gold.
Yeah, I think this could have maybe been played a little bit faster from TSM. I don't know if Haunter, or if Hyper, my apologies, necessarily needed to stop for Gromp and for Rift Herald. I would have preferred you just stop for Rift Herald, then come up here and then try to make the play onto TN before he really was able to call up heal and prepare for the counter play. Because if that were the case, then they likely could have dove him or at least pushed him far enough back to where that Rift Herald would have meant first tower. Instead, they just end up with like 3 plays, what will be 4 play here because the TP is still down up to this point. So Haunter will be able to crash another wave and grab an additional play, if not the whole tower, as CLG makes the response play of setting up bot side for what will be the Dragon that's available right now if they want to anytime soon.
There will be not only the TP advantage for CLG, but also the cannon barrage to make sure it's a little bit easier for them to secure that objective. If TSM play this one smart and cautiously, they should just give that up without a fight because they already have so much pressure in this top side.
They do. Actually, yeah, so this is the response play. CLG knows topside is going to be a point of attraction here for the side of TSM, trying to grab that initial gold lead. They do like that quite a bit, as they enjoy using it to flex around the map a little bit in some of these skirmishes, and especially Hyper likes to use gold advantage very heavily to push a lead. But so they go for a little bit more of a comforting play. They've got a composition that scales with a Rise and with a Gangplank into the later stages. So they're saying, we are okay waiting until we get into the later stages, trying to play for Dragons instead. You can have that top lane tower, at least you can get a bunch of pressure on the top lane tower. That will likely get cracked soon enough from the side here of TSM, because it is, I think, even less than a plate. I think we're on half a plate at this point. So that should go down at some point as Hyper also makes his way to the top side of the map.
But here, this is where we kind of see things a little bit difficult for the side of CLG. Because unlike last game, where they had the full scaling composition, they knew that they were going to be able to win so long as they could hold their own. Here, they have to be careful, because Cody-san and Hyper are going to be far more threats in the late game, in the mid game especially, too, to try to have these fights that constantly are putting pressure onto CLG members like TN, like RJS, even like Katsuri.
They will. Katsuri is, they haven't been able to play the bot lane a ton, which is my one fear, is that, like, today Kalista has been kind of the strong side, or, like, the strong weak side, I guess, just because nobody can aggress against it, because it's really difficult, but it's still powerful enough to where, like, you have to warrant a bunch of respect, which is kind of what it's used for. Oh, actually, a bit of interaction. I wonder if, is Tiana here alone? No, yeah, he's got reinforcements.
He is trying to bait them in at the moment, but TSM are smart on that one. They read that play like a book. They're like, there's no way a Gangplank is playing this aggressively and nobody's nearby.
They had 4 members readily available. I know Galio Ultimate was up, and I'm curious why they didn't just like at least try to push them out of the jungle or force them into a bad situation a little bit more, because now they get a flank into that, and I think they're pushing into Volibear as much as possible.
They're just bulling around poor Keel, because Kian, what can he do? He is so far behind at the moment. You can even see that RGS, while having a lead, still wait until he can get either the Everfrost or even just complete an item, get his Mythic soon. A lot of members on at CLG are still scaling. They're still working to get towards that late game, while on the other side, TSM members are getting those Mythics, and they are bullying their members.
And on one regard, what you've got right now is like Ryze is currently sitting in with a sizable gold advantage, which is expected over Galio, but the roaming potential of Galio can get him some kills, get him some experience back. But Sword has fallen at least a little bit behind in terms of the gold department. Same with the Kalista, where like Kalista is expected to have a good laning phase and currently leads over top of the Kai'Sa. So there's a break point here where like the gold advantage is in favor of TSM, but a fair amount of that currently is actually in your Renekton compared to this Gangplank, who can affect a fight with an ultimate as well as like the barrels and things like that come through. So once Divine Sundering is actually completed for the most part, I think that's a point where you can start striking as CLG with some of this damage coming through, so long as Katsuri hooks are around to make sure that that's going to go well.
That is not now. That is a few minutes away. And it's not even the Divine Sundering coming in from Tian. He went for the Trinity Force instead, trying to get a little bit more of this mid-game and even late-game scaling, the burst damage that he can get from that.
Interesting. It's only interesting mostly, like, there are actually much better stats on that item now compared to the beginning of the season. At the beginning of the season, it was all attack speed, which is not at all what a Gangplank really wants. I'm going to actually table that discussion because there's plays all over the place.
Yeah, nice flash away from Katsuri, but it is going to be the immediate pop of the eye while Haunter trying to be able to get away. He should be able to slice and dice his way back to the team. Keel now, he's in a bad spot. Could have been fought, but instead they're playing this one cautiously. They realize that Haunter had already used dominance. Probably not necessarily the best time to fight.
Did he just, like, run up mid lane right there?
I think he
so
did.
Lost. CLG's just running through towers, like, willy-nilly, as much as they want this game. Happened to Hooks earlier, it just happened to Keel, where he, like, walked straight through mid-towers. It's getting taken by Rift Herald, but thankfully no one goes down on either side as TSM expand their lead to 2K, or actually keep their lead at 2K, from where it was just a bit ago. I think it shrunk and then it came back out to where it's at now. I am curious whether or not this like scaling is going to come through, especially because like Kai'Sa's around and it is difficult to get onto Kai'Sa. So Cody-san could do some heavy lifting here from the side of TSM. So that is something else to track, is like how much gold is Kai'Sa, or my apologies, not Kai'Sa, Xayah currently grabbing.
Yep, Xayah is one of those champions. There it is, the Kraken Slayer completed that can really cut through these members of CLG Academy, as well as being able to kite back. Because we talked about it before. This TSM Academy's lineup, this entire composition, is about being able to facilitate Hyper as much as possible, while Cody-san, you're on your own, kid. You're going to use that Feather Storm, you're going to stay alive, and we're going to pray for you. That is about it.
Yeah, there's 2 threats to that. The first threat is, of course, the Volibear, and the second threat is the Kalista Ultimate. If Kalista Ultimate is able to tag Xayah, she can always press Ultimate, or she can flash. The same happens with the Volibear, so you don't need the Gale Force for additional select security. As teamfight potential to come through, they have the ability. Really nice GP ultimate. A couple
of those spears, and here's the fight in, but it's the Stormbringer away, trying to pull back in. Hooks, they've lost Keel, got the knock-up, but they lost the Dragon too. Again, you're a little bit too late to the party to be able to help anything. Instead, you're only going to escort your team away.
It's tough. Right there, TSM still has a very good composition for the early game. They still have a gold advantage, and so they're able to press their will even through Gangplank ultimates to be able to find a fight. Keel has kind of been bullied. Oh, the Diana ult!
Hooks had to flash to be able to survive. It looked a little dicey there. He had a lot that he had to be able to stay safe, but unfortunately having to use all of it means that now you've lost your Tom Kent safety net.
You have quite a bit of safety is now gone, especially because like those W's don't protect members anymore. That ultimate is a one-time use pretty much, so now the flash can't even get somebody even further out of that situation, so that's even tougher to try to come up with here. So he is for the most part just a rock to throw at the enemy team. CLG tried to rush this to put themselves onto Soul Point, if I recall, and going through Gangplank ultimate was a little bit kind of it was rushed, definitely. Yursan was able to get out of it initially with that W, and then it was the flank from Sword that really did so much, as it was damage and CC. They went on to Keel and RJS shoving them out before anything else. So big props, especially to Sword, being able to find that angle in the backside of the fight to put pressure into these really strong members and the potential fight that could have come out from the side of CLG.
I'll say this. This might sound wild, because you don't want to get aced early on, But I actually feel like in that play, you get the dragon. You don't care if you're going to all die afterwards. You get the damn dragon because you're at soul point at that point. You have a Callista. You have the ability to keep that in your pocket easily, and they didn't do that. Instead, they fell back, and they still lost a member. They still lost so much control that they already had a tenuous relationship with as well. Now they have nothing they could really do for quite some time.
I'm just baffled right now. I'm kind of like just surprised as all belief that currently RJS, who is in perhaps one of the easiest lanes in the world for Rise, is currently at 221 farm, 225 farm now, at 19 minutes. That is an obscene level that you could actually talk about when it comes to exactly how much that is. You're not supposed to do math on stream, but I'm pretty sure it's like, I think it's 12. I think it's pretty much 12. It's like right below 12 CS per minute, which is about perfect. It's a slightly less than perfect because you get like that cannon minion every wave. But man, just the ability of RJS to just farm his way out of this early game that CLG has had to kind of tank to make sure that he's keeping his team in especially his Rise relevant within these fights and things that are going to come up. He's already on 2 items basically just through farming alone. That's really impressive.
So you said a lot of important math stuff there, but I was really almost hoping that you were just going to say 12 and not say what it was with. Like, you just say, the number is 12. It's like, yeah, 12 what?
12 farm.
But I was really hoping you just leave it there, and it's just like, 12? What 12 what?
I was a physics undergrad. I was taught to use units, unfortunately. I apologize to you, Mr. Matt.
No, it's okay. I just would have been really fun. But going into this one and looking at how this game is playing out at the moment. We're 20 minutes into the game, and maybe it's a little bit later, but it does give me a little bit of deja vu of what we saw last time. RJS in a good position, getting a lot of damage like that, getting a lot of gold into his pocket that he's forcing a lot of these members of TSM to try to play around. You can even see here that Hyper, he realized that Heal was nearby and wanted to see if instead they could turn onto the jungler, because that would mean immediately the Baron's taken.
They were really rushing as fast as possible to try to make that play happen, even though they had Girsan and Zaya a little bit further back than they would have wanted for that fight start. But still, it shows the ruthlessness that TSM is taking into some of these fight attempts, because they really do want to take it to CLG while they have this advantage in the game. Because again, Rise slowly ticking time on. Eventually, Gangplank is going to get to that point as well, especially with Trinity Force. 2-3 completed items starts to really pump out the DPS in terms, or at least the burst and all the damage that you can have from the barrels and things like that coming out of TN. As this early game has been dangerous, but it hasn't been just like completely thwarted here for the likes of CLG, where they're losing, but they're not losing that badly with the composition that they've got. The one big problem, I think, is that their front line is Tom Kench, who is a support, so he doesn't have much money. And the other one is Keel, who is currently behind and also went Tsundere first item, which means that he is not soaking the most damage on the likes of this Bully Bear very quickly in this game anytime soon.
I'd be surprised if we saw a repeat of that Zonia's build in
100%.
This game. You need to be a frontline. You need to have tank stats. Sure, you can do a lot of damage with the Divine Tsundere, with the press the attack, but I don't think that you can go for that greedy build path again.
I don't believe so either. We've seen cross-map turret plays. Hyper and Yurson are here to try to punish TN, as on the other side, Rise able to grab that fight flash.
This time they should be able to kill TN. It's been a long time coming, Gangplank. Long time coming.
You take this trade, I think, all day, but they're immediately onto the Baron. It gets spotted out, but you have 3 members on the top side of the map with nobody. A Hunter that has TP, but maybe he can't get here in time because there's no ward in great position, and he's taking this tower. He's got to go right now. Okay, CLG knows that there's a possibility of this going down, so they're just going to avoid this as all possible. I loved the idea of trying to pull TSM off as much as possible, but that was just a blunder. I figured that they would actually get fought and end up losing there, so I'm glad CLG was able to know that was the case.
Thing is, would they have lost? That's the big question for me. I'm actually not sure. It would have taken a long time for TSM members to get there, and I almost think that you just peel back, kill Sword, go back to the Baron. That's the play to do. Because now, what have you lost? You've lost the control of the Dragon, again, losing out the soul point that you could have possibly gotten. You got nothing topside, you got no gold to speak of, you even lost vision control of both halves of your jungle.
I think The fear that they had right here was that if Hyper is able to get there on time, or even if anyone's able to get to the pit on time, immediately they have 2 people because they have Sword coming in. They were close enough with Yurasan where like the engage could be there. And so if you got 3 members and 2 of them are engage, and they can stall for Hyper. And so they didn't have the damage to bring down the Baron, so I respect that they called it off. I like what you said, that they lost a ridiculous amount of control on the map, and especially with like the dragon stacking, that is another thing to commend. But with the late game scaling comp, they bought themselves 10 minutes with that cloud and the mountain. And while yes, they're giving up ocean drakes and they're giving back a bunch of this like potential for soul point potentially to come through from the likes of TSM, they are buying themselves more time by taking those 2 to begin with. And that's more like dragon cycles that they can wait through to get itemization. Because you're seeing Ryze is almost on 3rd item, probably going to end up with like a Rabadons as this 3rd item or something like that. You have 2 completed items, probably will have a 3rd by the time the next real fight comes out for Katsuri, and 2, probably 2.5 maybe items, depending on how much Tien is actually farming. And maybe at that point, that's where you're comfortable to fight around. Like 3rd, 4th Drake from the side of TSM maybe is where they're really looking to put on the gas.
Would do that, and I'm looking at these inventories right now. Look at what is in Keel's inventory. He's gone for the stopwatch. Doesn't guarantee that he's going to go for the Zonias, but I see double stopwatch on the other side, and now this is the play I wanted to see earlier, but they've left Keel completely alone to Hyper. Hyper trying to be able to take him down. It's going to be the Stormbringer, but who dies first? Sword's still alive. He goes golden. Should be one more. There it is, and huge Moonfall doesn't do enough again for poor Hyper, and now there's the one caught in the rough play. Shut down, gifted over to Katsuri. 3 members remain for TSM. They're looking to see if they can chase him down. They got the slow coming in from the cannon barrage, but they have a little bit of movement speed from the help of the Scuttle Crab, but unfortunately that is not going to be enough to stop the Baron.
Now you got to try to get into this pit if at all possible. You have AoE potentially to work with the likes of Cody Sun, but he's got to get into the pit. He's got to put feathers down as much as possible. Yurasan
trying to be able to get in, only going to be able to get the knock-up on RJS, and now they're looking for Cody Sun, but they're cutting back. Tia's still alive, and Keel's in the backline. He's going to look for it, and the person the attack gets them. But on the other side, Hunter was able to get 1 for 1, make it 2 because the support was able to take down the bear, but unfortunately the bear doesn't need to be there. They just wanted to kill off a croc.
They only keep Yurasan alive. Hyper is back, so they can't commit to this Baron, but CLG find themselves another play on this map to get back in the same way that they were able to find previous ones in the last game. Rotations on a couple of plays, and RJS at the back of all of it this entire time with that Realm Warp, able to set themselves up for that topside pick to take Sword out of the equation. And when Sword's out of the equation, a lot of this team fight falls apart, especially if they don't have members together. Hyper then also had a really great ultimate, but again, too aggressive, can't find the follow-up, and the rest of the team falls. So that means that you don't have the ability to contest Baron, and if you do, then they're going to step back and they're going to kill you. At least they did thwart that Baron attempt, because it was a very legitimate threat that was held here from the side of CLG, but they've bought themselves more time and more gold to fight with next time they get into this one.
This is also an amazing story for RJS. He has been struggling this split especially. He had a lot of rough games early on, but this is a player that they have now built this composition around, getting Ryze 2 times in a row. I think you already talked about how much the CS per minute they've gifted over to him, and you can see how it's paying off.
It's ridiculous, yeah. And you're thinking he's not getting a ton of kills, but now all of a sudden he is starting to be a very big factor inside of these fights as much as possible. And if he's able to pick up even more gold, become this kind of glass cannon type Ryze that's going to have the Rabadons here in a second, it's going to be near impossible for TSM to do much because their counter engage is really good, and they'd have to catch RJS on that from anything else. So if they buy the space for RJS and there's no counter engage to come through, that means that Ryze just gets to dump DPS into anybody he wants, and there is no counterplay whatsoever for that.
Not at all. And you can even see there, they tried to get onto RJS.
Oh, yeah.
They knew that he was the target. If they could kill him, they could win. Unfortunately, they weren't able to do anything to him. He was able to still kite back with this team, so they had to change targets. They had to then flip who they wanted to actually kill. And unfortunately, you haven't killed the actual threat. You haven't killed RJS. And now he's got to Magize because he's that confident he can survive long.
Yeah, he's going to need to stack that a lot better than what he's got right now.
Look, he just got it, man. Come on.
I know he's had a Dark Seal forever.
Right. But he's only... Okay, he's 1-0 and 3. Come on. Come on.
Oh, that should add more stacks.
Oh,
okay, here's a TP in for another fight.
Again, gets gobbled up. Looking for the Abyssal Forge. Not going to be able to take it instead. They're trying to see if they can drag back in.
Wow.
They realize that Tien is all for naught. Hooks went back in. They got Katsuri with a Moonfall. And CLG, it looked like you were going to be able to wrestle this game back, but you threw it all away.
You did. The Gangplank ultimate there almost got everybody out of dodge as fast as possible, but they were able to run through it and able to find another pick onto the likes of Katsuri. And now they are the ones on the side of TSM who are going to be threatening the Baron. It's a decently fast Baron. You have like the Kraken Slayer on the likes of the Xayah. You got the Renekton, and you have a Diana as well. More important, I think, is the turn off, especially because Galio ultimate is still up. If Hyper is able to get into the back line and deal a death blow, get onto RJS, there is legitimate trouble for the side of RJS as they, I think, are just going to take this trade of Baron for third Drake, trusting in the scaling yet again. They are willing and able to say, we are going to take this to a 35-minute game. We are willing to fight you around the next Drake. That is what they're putting their foot down for. They're saying, we will get the next Ocean Drake, we will get the Ocean Soul, and we will outscale you in this game. They do not believe that TSM are capable of dealing a death blow with this Baron buff. Personally,
I agree with the play. I think that is what you do there. You don't try to contest it. Normally, I'm all for the Baron steals. I'm all for that. But here, it was a good call from them. Make sure that they are themselves within soul point. You have great wave clear with RJS, with Tien, and with Katsuri. You can survive a lot of this. And you can even see here that despite being 2 levels down, Tien's getting a lot of damage back onto Hunter. And here comes Keel to make sure they can take down the Croc. Try to make sure they can get him before any member's going to be able to save him. But the Moonfall into the backline, you're going to be able to get the kill on Tien. And they turn around onto RJS. He goes golden to be able to survive. Hyper's running away from the fight, knowing that he can't really fight. But Hunter is re-engaged with the Call of the Meek to be able to get a little help. But Ren was able to take him down. Realm Warp in. Hooks wants to be able to take it. Hyper's gone golden. Knockup coming in abound with Sword into the backline as well. And he's going to be able to get the knockup. RJS, the king, he has been usurped by TSM.
Oh my goodness. It looked like a solid fight from the side of CLG because they were able to get RJS into decent situations. Katsuri was still alive the entire time, but unfortunately, again, it is Sword, the Galio, and the CC that are coming out once they walk in on the engage that are able to generate these turns as fast as possible as only Haunter goes down in exchange for 3 members on the side of CLG. And I know what they're thinking. They're thinking, okay, we can get some Baron buffs off. We can prevent this push from coming through and we can compete now instead of later. But really, they are the ones who opted to play patient by saying, we're going to take third Dragon, and now they're going to have to suffer the consequences of double inhibitor being taken, if not more, from the side of TSM into CLG. How long are that? 15 seconds on RJS shouldn't be enough to finish the game with, but still, 2 inhibitors down are going to make it very difficult in 3 minutes to try to contest for Dragon.
That is a big loss of momentum for CLG Academy. They had done so much to try to claw back this game, and it almost looked like this was going to be a great turnaround from them. But you can see the members on the minimap starting to rotate around for TSM.
Look how far Galio was. He was in bottom lane and had to walk all the way there before the ultimate would end up coming through onto Hyper. They stalled onto RJS, which was really big because he got to turn and DPS into Haunter as fast as possible. And right here, they're thinking, okay, if we put enough people there, RJS and Katsuri can fight from the backline. But Sword is just too powerful. The taunt comes through, is able to get all this CC and prevents Rise from doing anything more. Keel gets pushed out the other side of the fight, where it's like CLG's like, okay, finally, we can play a front-to-back team fight, but they don't get that option whatsoever because of the ultimate that comes in from Sword. They were waiting on Sword to arrive. The ultimate was there to get there, and eventually ended up being the turning point in the battle that has now led to an 8,000 gold lead for TSM. They are working their way into winning this game off the back of a lot of the zone pressure that's come through from the Galio.
Threw it on a Keel, but not going to follow it up. Instead, Cody-san takes Feral to the face. Still only level 15 for Tien. You'd like to be able to get 16 just to be able to get that final rank in his ult. But they can hold on. They've been holding on. There's no longer a Baron buff on the side of TSM. But CLG, they seem like they're lacking that confidence to be able to hold the line at this last inhibitor turret.
Ooh. Okay, Gangplank ultimate, and they're able to catch out at least one in the front.
He has to go golden. Unfortunately, he's going to die the moment he respawns. Flashed away. Good knockup coming in from the Hooks, so they can pick off Hyper, and they're looking for another Abyssal Voyage to the backline. But look at Hooks. He gets bounced around, so no thick skin. They got a huge shield coming in from the side of Hunter to be able to turn it around. Katsuri trying to be able to get it back. He's trying to stand this. He's barely alive, waiting it out to be able to get a double kill coming in from Cody-san, making a triple kill. RJS, the last surviving member, one against the world, trying to be able to do his damnedest to fight back, but you got to be careful because you can see Hunter. You see Sword, you see the minions all pouring into the base. RJS not able to claw back this game for CLG, and they will not find their first 2-0. TSM will even us up 1-1.
They are so close at the end of this game for that team fight to set up RJS and Katsuri to just be able to work front to back, but not quite enough damage to be able to actually work their way through. Because RGS, he was delivering E after Q after E after Q and comboing as much as he could, pressing those two fingers back and forth as much as you could on the Like Surprise. But it just wasn't there. Even on Rabadons, it just wasn't enough to be able to break through that gold lead that TSM was holding. And that's a tough one because, again, they were waiting for that scaling. They opted into it as best they could, but they just could not convert into the late game as much as possible. That poor decision, I think, around that second or the Baron that they had given up, trying to take off that Baron buff from the likes of Hunter is what really ended up costing them, which is unfortunate because it was a very close game.
It was a very close game, but like we were saying as well during this game, is that unlike in game one, where TSM lacked that scaling option themselves, here they had those options. Not only that, then when they found these fights, they were able to snowball out of control. Poncer, too, was absolutely massive in so many of these fights.
That he was. He did great just being a frontline and being able to soak a ridiculous amount of damage. He wasn't doing like Renekton lane dominant things, but look how long it takes him to go down here. He buys enough time for literally Galio stepping off bottom wave to be able to get up here fast enough, which is just insane to think about. That over that amount of time, that's how long it took for this Renekton to end up going down. He also pushes Katsuri away from the DPS into Hyper or Yursan, which buys them a little bit more health as well, and it's what kind of prompts this entire play because Hyper is low, and they try to chase him down to set up RJS and Katsuri, but they aren't able to get there before Galio ends up stunning up everybody, and the damage was now officially gone. This was the fight that I think sealed the fate here for the side of CLG. And they go for this base defense. I want to point your attention to what they're doing because they're setting up a front-to-back team fight for the Rise, which is fantastic. But again, he's really a lot more contingent on fighting on angles when you have things like Everfrost because you can set up like full combos into individual people. If you're going for more upfront damage, you want Ludens and things like that. And I'm not saying Ludens would have won him this fight, but this is a situation where that extra DPS could have made a difference here or there just to make sure that you can like put more pressure into people. Because like right there, a little more damage might have done a long way and maybe taken out one additional member. But again, that's scraping bottom of the barrel as the Rise was just a little bit off of being able to carry fights on his own.
Exactly. It was just a rough game for CLG that time around because they're so close to clawing back that game, getting their first 2-0. It seemed like they were going to be able to do exactly what they did in game one. They 3,000 gold behind, win team fight after team fight after team fight, get these objectives to be able to win, and it fell apart.
But on the other hand, TSM are able to come back off the back of the Galio play coming out from Sword. It wasn't the greatest in lane, didn't shut down the Rise, but it was fantastic in team fights. So that's nice to see that they have another weapon to add to their arsenal with like the Galio roaming around, as well as the fact that now they are tied, at least in record, with Immortal. So they are right there on that playoff bubble, ready to make a strike tomorrow and in their final week over in week 9.
And that was just a really good play coming in from TSM to be able to keep that game because it did look rough. A lot of credit over to Hanser, a lot of credit over to Sword. I think that Sword played that matchup perfectly fine. I think Galio into Rise matchup, they're not really ever going to win.
Not fun for Galio, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what? We have our final interview of the day. I hear we have Sword on the line for our Verizon post-game interview. So first off, gotta say congratulations on that second game victory. Gotta ask because it was definitely a doozy. So how does it feel?
Thank you. I was pretty stressed in the beginning since they lost game one, so that put more pressure on me, trying to get them at least in one day. But it ended up winning, so I feel better now.
Let me ask you this because I know last week Hanser talked about that you're one of his favorite players to work with and that you're a great player, but like confidence is something that you've had problems with. Is there something that like you can take from a game like this, or is the ability now to be on this playoff bubble? What is there something that can give you, or something that you can rely on maybe here inside of like these games to take away that gives you confidence in your play when you're able to bring back a series after a rough loss like that? Do you believe in yourself more?
I mean, I just have to pick like more aggressive champions, maybe like skill matchup, and then try to get solo kills. So I mean, like if I choose Galio, there's not much I can do. But
honestly, I don't even know if you have to play around the solo queues. Personally, I think how you played that second game was perfect. You were a perfect setup to support the team. So even going into this one, this Galio play and being able to help out the rest of the team, is this like a new change of pace that we might see more from you?
I have a lot of other picks, but this game I just felt like Galio was a good pick in the draft. But I do have like other style, not just like those Galio sacking champions. So we'll see.
All right, and then I guess coming into the back half of week 8, coming into week 9, you guys are pretty much neck and neck with the Mortals right now. Do you see anything for yourself or for, I guess, TSM Academy in general that you guys can improve to just get yourselves over that finish line to make sure that you're going to be in that Academy playoffs? And if so, what do you think that is?
We have great players on the team. Like, we have veterans was like that win the world, so we just have to work with our get a good scrim week, and then hopefully we just pop off that week because the players on our team has shown to be like world class, so we just gotta keep that, and then we'll be able to beat everyone.
I believe in you, Sword. I think you're going to be able to do great things coming up soon. But before we let you go, get back to practice, get ready for tomorrow, is there anything you'd like to say to everyone out there?
I mean, I know I haven't been playing like the entire game this split. Like play like half of them and then Takeover play the other half. So I hope everyone can like cheer for me and Takeover, and then hopefully TSM Academy come up strong this split compared to last split.
Well, I believe in you, Sword. I believe in Takeover as well. Thank you so much for joining for the interview, even if my camera isn't doing so well at the end. I hope you have a wonderful night.
Thank you. You too.
Well, it was a good showing in that second game to make sure they secured that victory. And I got to say, Sword, he did really good on the Galley. I know he's got a lot more of his Zoe as well. We haven't been able to see too much of it this split, but he is a player that definitely has a lot deeper of a champion pool than we have just seen today.
Yeah, his versatility in these last couple of weeks to be able to adapt to some of the new styles that have come about from the meta have actually been really impressive to me. I know they at Hunter talked a little bit about him needing to be confident and talking about how he has a bunch of picks, and I really wish that like he had the ability to bring out all of them because I think he is an incredible player, and it's really nice to see him when he is playing on his best because he's really talented when he's at his best. So I've been happy to see the success they've been able to have around Sword and Takeover over the course of the split. Both of them are fantastic mid laners, and now right in the thick of it there for the playoff race. So they got to bring out the best in both of those players to make sure that they are absolutely a top-notch play. Like he said, like they've got world-class players, they've got fantastic academy players, things like that, and they have the ability to compete with any team. We've seen that time and time again throughout the split.
But it will definitely be a good race for that final playoff berth. We'll see who's going to be able to take it. It looks like my setup is getting over this heat here in California. I have been sweating this whole time, but they were worth it. This entire day was worth it. It's great casting with you again, Tina, and for everyone out there, I hope you have a wonderful night. We'll be back tomorrow for more Academy action.